It looks like the room is pretty well populated, Carolyn, if you
I was
just
going
want
to
to
say,
start
I
whenever
don't
you're ready.
see, so the chat box is just now loading up. Oh, it's not what I was looking for, but okay. I don't think I need that chat box.
No, I like to minimize it. Yeah, just keep it out of your way. It's easier to keep out of your way.
Well, if you can see it, then I'll work
Nope.
with that.
Nope, your screen looks great.
All right. I can hear you clicking.
Sorry, I'll mute myself.
I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for attending this webinar on how to update building codes, a primer and resources for cities in need. My name is Carolyn Horner. I'm a Senior Environment and Development Planner with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and I am one of the two hosts for today's webinar. Jason Vandever from SPEER will be today's second presenter. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We will have two presentations today with time for questions once both speakers have presented. Please submit questions through the chat box at the bottom of the Zoom screen during the webinar, and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for. The presentation will be posted on the COG's Regional Building Codes website, which is linked on the next slide, and it will also be available on SPEER's YouTube channel. The webinar today will discuss two items. One, the current resources available through COG's Regional Codes Coordinating Committee for the code adoption process and how to access those resources. And two, current resources available through SPEER for the energy code adoption process and how to leverage those resources for your town in need. So first, a brief overview of who we are. We are the North Central Texas Council of Governments, or the COG, and we are a voluntary association of local governments. We are one of 24 COGs in Texas, and our main function is to transcend jurisdictional boundaries to promote sound development and facilitate cooperation among our member governments. COG has worked hard to bring resources and technical assistance to our member governments over the past several decades, specifically related to building codes. On the screen is the link to the Regional Building Codes Division of the Environment and Development Department. This website has information on the 5 areas shown. We will cover 4 of them today: code amendments, code adoption surveys, upcoming events and trainings, and tools and resources. We will also highlight the Regional Codes Coordinating Committee, one of the oldest committees at COG, and it's the committee that oversees the areas that we are looking at today. So first up, we're going to look at amendments. The ICC publishes new code books on a 3-year cycle. And let me pull this over for you. Our advisory boards start meeting at the time of publication and propose a set of regionally appropriate amendments to the codes. The amendments are reviewed and voted on by the Regional Codes Coordinating Committee, and then reviewed and voted on again by our executive board. This cycle occurs every 3 years. We also provide a summary of any significant changes, the amendments from the previous years. For example, significant changes between the 2015 and the 2018 regional amendments. For those of you looking at updating your fire code, there are 2 options. The difference between the 2 options is based on your jurisdiction's firefighting capabilities. Your jurisdiction should review both options and select the one that is appropriate for your municipality. Hopefully, none of you on here today need amendments for codes prior to 2009, but you can find them here if you're interested. In fact, we go all the way back to 1997. And that didn't go where I wanted it to go. The next slide is on the Regional Building Codes Adoption Survey. Every spring, the Regional Codes Coordinating Committee sends out a survey to all member jurisdictions in the region. The survey specifically covers the ICC suite of codes, and we consolidate the results for the RCCC and make them available for free. Annual survey results are available online, and we actually started mapping them several years ago, and the results are free for you to browse. I'm going to bring up the most recent map for the 2020 survey results and highlight a few of the respondents. It does take a moment for this map to load.
It's because it's so graphically pleasing. Y'all put a lot of work into that thing.
We do. So, for example, there are 15 tabs. I'm not going to cover all 15 of them for you today. However, I want to highlight a few of them. So tab number 2 is the International Building Code. There are a couple of respondents to this that were still on the 2009 IBC. However, the majority are on the 2015 or the 2018 IBC. Tab 3 is the International Fire Code, and you notice it's the same response. We've got a couple from 2009, but the majority are 2015 and 2018. Tab 5, we have a slightly different color for our 2009. We do have a few still hanging out there on 2009, but the majority, again, at least, are from 2015 and 18. The International Energy Conservation Code has a few more people on 2018. We still have some 2015s. Not as many going quite as far back, which is a good thing, I think. And the last one I want to highlight today is tab 11, which is the National Electric Code. This particular code is not published on the exact same cycle with the ICC codes. Yes, it's on a 3-year cycle, but it's basically 1 year off from the ICC. So the current NEC is the 2017. Our COG Electric Advisory Board is still reviewing these codes and will be coming out with amendments to the 2020 code soon. But you'll notice there is somebody out there still on the 2008 code, but the majority are on the 14 or the 17.
You're not going to click on the little circle and call them out by name? You're kinder than I am.
I'm going to be nice. Next item I want to cover is probably pretty short. It's our calendar. We have a codes-specific events and training calendar. Right now, for the month of July, this item is the only item on here. However, if you go back to June, you'll notice we start having some more items that were announced. These are not always items that we are hosting. We are putting them out there for your viewing and use. And if you want more information, you can click on them and it takes you to those specific items and you can register and attend. Now, this is a sub-calendar of the COG Environment and Development Department calendar, which covers all of our different departments, including stormwater, development excellence, solid waste. So this is just, this particular one that I'm showing you is just for building codes. but it is a place where if we are aware of an item, if you want us to post it for you, we can do that. Or if we go out and find it, we can do that as well. Our Tools and Resources website is our newest item for this department. What we have here are just items that we have either created ourselves or believe will be useful for the majority of our members. What we have here that I'm going to show you is a approximately 2-minute long code adoption process explanation video. This video was produced and funded through our Regional Codes program. It is available on the website for free, but I'm going to play it for you now, and this will give you a good overview of what is required for going through the code adoption process. It takes a minute.
So, you want to adopt new building codes or code amendments for your city, but don't know where to start? This video will make it easy. Step 1. Add the code adoption item to a City Council workshop or other appropriate board agenda for discussion. Discuss the need for updated construction codes and possible amendments to address local or regional concerns. Discuss the recommended amendments published by the NCTCOG Regional Codes Coordinating Committee. Confirm the process and timeline for getting your item on a City Council agenda. Step 2. Place an item on the City Council regular agenda for adoption of each code or as a group of codes. A minimum of 21 days prior to your City Council meeting, advertise to the public that your city intends to adopt new codes along with code amendments and encourage public comments. Advertisements can include notices, flyers, bill inserts, and website posted information. Step 3. Prepare packets for the City Council meeting. Your packet should include the ordinance adopting each code or the group of codes, as well as all desired amendments, letters of support from the North Central Texas Council of Governments Executive Board, the Chief Building Official, and Fire Code officials, and an optional memo from the code official explaining significant changes to the code from the previously adopted codes. Step 4. Present your codes with amendment items to the City Council and answer any questions they may have. If your municipality has a population over 100,000, please review sections 214.217 and 214.218 of the Texas Local Government Code for additional requirements. Congratulations, you have now completed the code adoption process.
So there's a lot of information packed into that 2 minutes. The video, as I stated before, is on the website. It's free. You can view it as many times as you need. If you need to double check what parts of the code you need to reference, if you are over 100,000 in population, that is there at the end. That video will give you a good idea of what you need to do. And I would recommend that you talk with your city secretary's office to make sure that you meet those requirements in terms of timing. Currently, there are a couple of other items also in the tools and resources. There is a Regional Codes Coordinating Committee Work Program flyer. This is a large program, a large item, so I'm not going to click on it. It does take quite a while to load, but I want to point out that it's there. We also, in this COVID era, have a 25% occupancy load table that was created by one of our Regional Codes Committee members. It's simplified so that a business can figure out what their percentage occupancy load is in light of the governor's orders at less than 100%. So there may be some other limiting factors in the occupancy of any specific building, but I wanted you to know that this is there if you need some assistance with working on occupancy load. I want to also highlight our Regional Codes Coordinating Committee, which is one of our oldest committees. since 1967, this committee has actively promoted the standardization of model construction codes in an effort to simplify the construction process, advance the safety of building systems, promote common code interpretation, facilitate the mobility of contractors, and reduce training and construction costs. This particular committee meets quarterly, and this is their page that gives you some information on them. The work of the committee is funded through voluntary cost participation by member cities. The cost share is based on your COG population estimates. You can pay at any time throughout the fiscal year. So here, if your population is 1 million plus, your cost share is $7,500. But if you have less than 10,000, your cost share is $500. And again, these are based on your population estimates. This table here is the table that we will be using for cost share participation for FY21, which starts October 1 of this year. At the bottom of the page are meeting information notes. So we've had 2 meetings this fiscal year, October and January. You notice items from the meeting are posted here on the website for your review after the meeting. Our next meeting is in just a couple of weeks, and you see that we are going to be doing that via WebEx. There's a draft agenda, work plan, some items that we're going to be covering. If you want to take a peek at how this committee operates, I recommend that on July 14th at 9:30 in the morning, you click on this link and you can come and see how this group operates. We also, underneath the Regional Codes Coordinating Committee, we have 5 advisory boards. So new code books are currently published and are currently scheduled to come out later this year. So our COG advisory boards will be meeting to start the amendment cycle by the end of the year. Now, the Electrical Advisory Board, as I mentioned before, is actually about to wrap up their review because their book came out 2020. Now, there was a slight delay to getting theirs done due to COVID. Usually they're done by the summer, but they will be done before the other advisory boards start their work. If you are interested in serving on one of the advisory boards, please contact me offline and I will send you a nomination form. So this concludes COG's presentation portion of today's webinar. Please hold any questions to the end after the SPEER event, and we will answer questions at the end. There is some contact information there on the screen. Jason, I'm going to hand control back over to you. And just as a reminder, this presentation will also be available on the COG website and the SPEER YouTube channel after today's presentation.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing yours and switch over to mine. And also, it's my understanding that we will send everyone a PDF of the presentation. So you will, all the hyperlinks and things like that, you will get a PDF of the presentation. A lot of my slides do have embedded hyperlinks. So just so you know, you will get, if you get a PDF, you can still click on those hyperlinks. And a couple of things just off of Carolyn's presentation. If you are looking for amendments prior to 2009, shame on you. You should go stand in the corner. And if you're a representative from one of those cities that's on less than the 2015 Energy Code, me working for SPEER, that's near and dear to my heart. So 40 lashes with a wet noodle. But now that the chastising is over, let me go ahead and get started. Happy to say that Corona dew is no longer there, but it might be growing again if we shut back down at the current rate. My name's Jason Vandiver. I'm Energy Code Program Manager for SPEER. Prior to joining SPEER, was a building official for the city of Granbury, which is an NCTCOG city. I served and currently serve on NCTCOG's Energy and Green Advisory Board. And for those of you on the webinar today that don't know how those advisory boards work, I mean, it is literally, you open the new code book, page 1 and you go through every page and you identify things that don't work for the area. And so those amendments that NCTCOG comes out with, those are not only, it's not just one person at NCTCOG coming up with them. I mean, it is a group of 20 plus people, and you have, you know, code officials, manufacturers, HBA representatives. Everybody has some input, and it's really a thorough, well-vetted process. I'm really happy to participate, and you know you're a code nerd when you're looking forward to sitting in those hearings, and I truly do. We also have a codes training calendar, but if you don't get, I looked at the attendee list today. I didn't advertise this webinar through our normal codes email distribution list because it is an NCTCOG that they are spearheading this, and I wanted to let them, you know, for it to be specific to the NCTCOG distribution list and cities that they serve. Well, I'm sure I'll probably rerun it at some point for our email distribution list. But if you're on the webinar today and you're interested in future webinars, we are an ICC preferred provider as well as NCTCOG. And just FYI, if you do need ICC CEUs for today's presentation, we can get those to you, no problem. It should be about an hour today. But if you want future notifications, you won't get junk email. The only time I send out emails through the email distribution list, just shoot me a note and I will add you to our codes and distribution list. So anyway, prior to, I mentioned I was a building official for the city of Granbury and actually underwent a code adoption while I was there. And so rather than telling you how great it went, I'm hoping to give you some pitfalls to avoid because I certainly made a few mistakes. One of them, there was no effective date. So literally right after council, they voted it in and those new codes were effective that immediately. I would recommend, it kind of depends on how you go about the code adoption process. If you've been, you know, advertising it for months and you've got flyers everywhere, well, then it might make sense for the effective date to be when council ratifies it. But a lot of times it might, in my opinion, you're better off at least 30 days out. And I kind of think like a 90-day window before it becomes effective is a pretty good rule of thumb. Now, if it conflicts with state law, and I'll talk about that quite a bit more, you might have some issues there that you want to avoid. Ultimately, I come at this through an energy code lens. You know, when I started with SPEER 6 years ago, after having left the city of Granbury, basically my role was to contact every building department in the state of Texas, find out what codes they were on, find out if they were talking about adopting any new codes, telling them about House Bill 1736 and how the 2015 Energy Code was the minimum code required by the state. And so I did a lot of that kind of work initially early on when I started with SPEER. And just, I grew up in the NCTCOG area on framing crews. So I've worn the tool belt and driven the nails, and then I've written the red tags as a code official. And then yes, now I'm a tree hugging hippie with a bad Corona haircut working for an energy efficiency nonprofit. But I try to blend those three worlds together and ultimately come up with something that makes sense and some good guidance and advice for the cities. And so hopefully I can come up with some of that here for you today. So who is SPEER and what do we do? Most of you I did recognize on here, but I did see a few new names. So I'll go ahead and we cover Texas and Oklahoma, as you can see here in blue. We're one of 6 what's called a REO, or a Regional Energy Efficiency Organization. And basically, prior to the Department of Energy's budget being monkeyed with 4 years or so ago, 3 years ago, we got a lot of funding through DOE, who, you know, realized that the best time to make a building energy efficient is while it's being built. But we still do a lot of work for DOE. We also have members, member companies, member cities. And if you're interested in joining SPEER, if you're a city and you're interested in joining SPEER, please reach out to me. And if you do, it's super cheap. I think it's $250 a year. And I'd be happy to meet your inspectors on site, field training, webinars, any way I could help you out. Certainly put you in front of the line for any kind of training that I could give. So this slide is just simply a placeholder to remind me I have a couple of polls to launch. I'm just curious. 3 quick questions. The first one, do you plan on updating your building codes in the next 6 months? COVID willing, of course. And I'll give just a few more seconds for this one to come in. I'd like to at least get half participation on the polls before I end the polling. I'm at 48%. Let me get one more answer and then I'll move on to the next question. There we go. And then polling. Okay, that's not the one. Share results. Okay, hold on just a second. Let me go back to polls and polling. There we go. Poll 2. I don't know why it's such a, and then I'm curious who on the line has been through a code adoption process before. So it looks like about 50-50 so far. So that's good. Hopefully we can help you. And I'll certainly talk more about what kind of help that NCTCOG and SPEER can give you going forward. And then let's see if I can get to the last poll question. And poll 3. And those of you that have been through the code update process, just an idea of about what kind of preparation it took. How much effort would you say as far as time went? Yeah, it's a couple less than 3 months, but several longer than a year. And it can be a very arduous process, especially, you know, if you're with a bigger city, and ultimately what I've found is a lot of times it's, you know, it might be the chief plumbing inspector, or it might be the fire inspector, but there might be one department that is kind of, I wouldn't say holding it up, but that is just really wanting to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and that can kind of slow it down a little bit. So let's keep going. So again, that 2-minute video I thought was fantastic, and it really gives a fantastic overview. As I was thinking about this and putting this presentation together, I was thinking about, what are actually the steps for adoption, and thinking about some of the mistakes I made. And I see this all the time. I think one of the first things you want to do, and again, these are hyperlinks, rather than hopping off and showing you these web pages, I'm going to go through all of the slides first, and then I'll go back and I'll show you about 8 or 9 web pages as well. And then I also want to highlight a few things in the code book. But as far as, and again, when you get a PDF of the slides, these are active links to web pages. So you will have those with the copy of the presentation. So to me, you certainly don't want to go through all the trouble of adopting new codes for your city that are in conflict with state law, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you know, when I was in Granbury, we were on the 2008 NEC. In the 2011 was the minimum required by TDLR, or right now, if you link to the NEC here, right now TDLR is mandating the 2017 NEC. So if you're in a city and you're on really old codes, and your council is advising, you know, that we don't want the most modern code, we want to kind of go in the middle somewhere, you know, okay, well, let's go with the 2012 codes and the 2014 NEC. Well, the 2014 NEC would be in conflict with state law. Technically, your inspector could only inspect to the 2014, but you know, if I had an electrician coming to pull a permit, and the electrician is like, oh, you're on the whatever, an old one, you know, the 2005 NEC, you know, prior to arc faults, when only like 2 GFIs were required. Oh, I don't have to put arc faults in this new house? And then I would turn to the electrician and say, well, who do you get your license through? And he'd say TDLR. I said, well, what does TDLR tell you to wire the house to? And it's the 2017. Another one, the International Swimming Pool and Spa Safety Code, starting, I believe it's September 1st. The 2018 will be effective for all pool and spa construction in Texas. And then since the 2009 IRC, residential fire sprinklers are required. However, there's a Texas state law that preempts the mandate of the residential fire sprinkler. I have noticed, like I said, I track about 800 or so cities in Texas. And there are a handful that do have some sprinkler requirements based on square footage. I don't read that allowance in the residential fire sprinkler law, but I'm certainly no lawyer. So that would be something to follow up with your city attorney. So again, you want to identify current codes in place as far as state law goes. Again, on the 2015 or greater on the IECC is state law. And then next, you're going to review your current ordinance. Is there some sort of, I know with the city of Temple on construction codes, there was a protocol in the current ordinance about taking it to the Construction Standards Board. Some cities have other construction boards in place, or maybe it requires you go to planning and zoning or something. Or maybe there's nothing in the ordinance at all and you want to establish a construction standards board. You want to establish some sort of protocol in place for discrepancies or help in amending the code. So reviewing the current ordinance is crucial. And really, there's some other things that can come in line with that as well. I know, for instance, back when I was building official for Granbury, we had an ordinance about public works projects. They had to have the letter of acceptance and have all their inspections in place and all of that before you could pull a permit for that job for a building permit. Well, that worked fine when we were doing infrastructure for a whole residential neighborhood, and you're going to have all the water and sewer and infrastructure in before you start building homes. But it was a terrible ordinance for like a single development. So for instance, we had a new car dealership going in, and the public works part of the project, they had to extend the water and sewer line across the frontage of the Highway 377 before they built this car dealership. Well, the problem was, so they were literally going to have to, by ordinance, dig the ditch, lay the public water and sewer line, cover all that back up, get their bond, and then redig it back out when they got their plumbing permit to run the water line to the building. And it just didn't make any sense. So reviewing current ordinances, fixing the bugs in the system, that's a super helpful step. Third is optional, and it's just, this is really going to depend on, are you a small city versus a big city? Do you have an active versus passive building community? City management's desire. I know, in Granbury, one of my councilmen was a home builder. So, you're darn right, I better engage the stakeholders and create fact sheets and do all those things. And there's plenty of cities that you can adopt new building codes and there won't be anybody at the city council hearing that says a word about it. So do you really want to send out flyers and create fact sheets and do all those things? That's really is going to depend on jurisdiction. And certainly the larger jurisdictions, there will be mechanisms in place for all of that to happen already. If there's not, I would be surprised, and can certainly speak with you offline about, helping you create some of those. Then the important part is actually drafting the new ordinance. Some cities don't have one at all. I haven't verified this, but my understanding is that chemical fertilizer explosion in the city of West ended up not getting any FEMA disaster money because they hadn't adopted a building code. And that was part of FEMA's, I don't necessarily know the truth of that, but the point is, are you modifying an existing ordinance? Are you repealing and replacing an ordinance with amendments? Or is it a brand new, if you have a little town that's never adopted a building code Is it a brand new from scratch ordinance? I forgot what the other considerations were, but we'll get to that hyperlink here when I go to the web pages here in just a minute. And then again, something else to keep in mind, make sure it aligns with your zoning or development ordinance. You know, and some of those other state laws, I know that House Bill 2439, that was an absolute, that will reduce your, well, we'll just put, if you don't have anything nice to say about the state legislature on that law, I'll just remain silent. So I'll remain silent. But that was the state law that basically said, hey, if a building material is allowed in the building code, hey, Mr. City, you can't prohibit it. So you could conceivably, you know, again, Granbury, on our zoning ordinance, all new single family construction had to be 80% brick or stone, at least 3 inches thick, and laid unit by unit in mortar. I mean, they were pretty picky. We wanted brick or stone on all the houses. Every new house in Granbury had to have a 2-car garage. Well, what that House Bill 2439 said, and I know most cities are just flat out ignoring it. Other cities have some different strategies in place to deal with it, roundabout ways. But you could, I mean, if vinyl siding's allowed, you know, conceivably you could, you at the permit office, you're not supposed to disallow plans with vinyl siding. I think that's kind of ridiculous and overreach. But anyway, just kind of give you the idea, reinforce the idea, double check your state laws. And I'll show you when we get to the web pages part, we'll look at a lot of those. I think that's all I wanted to say on that. And just remember on the new ordinance, and another idea, and I've seen this on some cities, when you do draft a new ordinance, some of the smaller cities actually have an auto adoption clause. We looked at doing that when I was with the city of Temple, just to keep from having to come back every 3 years to adopt new building codes. Our city attorney felt like that wasn't legal because his opinion was, well, how can you adopt something that you haven't even read yet? You know, how are you adopting something that doesn't even exist yet? Because that's kind of in effect what you're doing. But I know more than a handful of cities that do have an auto draft ordinance upon the date of publication. So literally the day ICC publishes it, before the building department's even read it, by ordinance, that is the minimum construction code for that city. I can give you a dozen. If you want to look at a city's wording on that, the city of Bonham, off the top of my head, and that's where I graduated high school, is why I remember it. But I know they have an auto update ordinance. Some other things to keep in mind when you're drafting that new ordinance, and I'll show the state law here in a minute. But I forget the number. But the law basically says you can't you can't relate your permit fees to the valuation of construction, even though that's the chart right out of the building code. So those are some other considerations to think about. That's what that other considerations link's for. And then after that, of course, your council hearing. And like the video from NCTCOG says, you know, the 21-day notice, all the proper notification protocol posting, all of that. And then just a reminder, put an effective date on there. And you might want it effective immediately. Again, I would recommend at least 30, 90 days kind of seems to be the sweet spot to me. And then I see this all the time. I mean, I spend a lot of time on building departments' websites. When you do adopt new codes, make sure you change your building permit, your website, all your form, update your form, send it into MuniCode, do all that updating, because it's, you know, if you have an out-of-town developer and he just hops on your website and sees that, oh, you're on the 97 Uniform Building Code, okay, and he goes through all this trouble designing a building, and it's like, oh, no, we adopted the 2012s 4 years ago. And I can't tell you how many city websites I see that don't have the updates. So make sure, send out notification, update the website. And then here's the part that I'm happy to help with, and that's follow-up and training and support is needed. The nice thing about SPEER, the price is right for that. The price is free. Any way I can help you all out, I'm more than happy to. I'll just send Carolyn and NCTCOG a bill for my travel in time. But anyway, I can help you out. It's free. The price is right, so don't hesitate to ask. This is just kind of an example. Again, and in effect, September 1st, Texas adopts the 2018 ISPSC. So if you're thinking about adopting new codes and you're trying to decide between the 15 and the 18, well, to me, the family of codes is meant to work in conjunction. This would give you the reason, and my reason, enough reason. Let's just go 2018s across the board. It's going to be effective September 1st in Texas anyway. Now, technically, it has to be built to the 2018, whether you've adopted it or not. It's kind of like the 2015 Energy Code. You're supposed to be building to the 2015 Energy Code, whether a city's adopted it or not. But along those lines, when I first started with SPEER, our executive director, Chris Herbert, sent the Texas Municipal League's attorney, Scott Houston, a letter basically asking him that. He's saying, hey, House Bill 1736 says the 2015 Energy Code's the minimum energy code for the state. And so she asked him specifically, do cities need to adopt it specifically to enforce it? And I certainly know there are a handful of cities up in the Texoma area, Bonham, Greenville, Gainesville, Sherman. A lot of those cities are using third-party inspectors, and they might still be on older energy codes, but they're third-party inspectors, no state law, and they're inspecting to the 15. But you're going to create less headache for your city if you actually get it in ordinance. And part of it was about a 3-page letter, and I'll show you a little excerpt from the letter that he wrote. Because it's pretty handy on the history of building code adoption, and it references a lot of it. But his opinion was a city must adopt the code by ordinance to properly enforce it, and I'd agree with that, but again, not an attorney. Another reason to adopt newer codes, frankly, they provide for better buildings. They provide for better, more comfortable, more durable, safer, more energy efficient, all of new products, new ASTM testing standards, all of this new stuff that comes out with new codes allows for better buildings. Are they more expensive? Sometimes they are more expensive, but typically the cost benefit analysis has been done, and the way the codes are developed, I mean, it's a consensus process. I mean, it's everybody's allowed to make comments, submit code proposals, and then code officials vote on it. So it's a pretty well vetted process. Third, the ISO rating. Those of you that don't know what ISO is, it's insurance. Basically, it helps set insurance rates for your jurisdiction. And if you're more than 2 code cycles back, you get a pretty significant ding on your ISO rating. 1 is the best. When I started with the city of Granbury, we were a 99. In other words, we had no rating. And then ISO came to audit me. And I spent the better part of a day with the ISO auditor going through everything that we did at Granbury. He wanted to know what codes we were on, what kind of training I got, how many inspections I did. That's another reason, another good argument to keep your inspection count down and to keep your training budget up is you'll get dinged on both of those on your ISO rating. And I can assure you, your city manager and city council, it's going to be a bad day for them when every single one of their constituents gets a 15% bump in their property insurance rate for their businesses. So ISO rating can be really important. Creating consistency with other municipalities. I mean, it's typically, the bigger cities kind of drive this, and most of the bigger cities, the vast majority of all the bigger cities are at least on the 2015s across the board. Very few are still on the 2012s. And so it really helps create consistency with the other municipalities. A subcontractor from South Lake, it can know what they want in Plano. And somebody working in Frisco, if you're on the same codes, it helps to create consistency. It raises the floor, and it really helps everybody reduce confusion. Keep in mind, the family of I codes is meant to work in conjunction with each other. It's kind of funny. So Chapter 11 of the IRC, for example, is a carbon copy, for all intents and purposes, of the residential chapter of the Energy Code. Chapter 13 of the IBC is 1 paragraph long, but basically what that paragraph says in Chapter 13 of the IBC is, for building thermal envelope and energy efficiency measures, refer to the same edition of the International Energy Conservation Code. We also call in Oklahoma it was SPEER. We covered Texas and Oklahoma, and I remember talking to a building inspector in Oklahoma, and they had adopted the 2015 IBC, but the 2000 energy code. And so, I'm looking at his amendments to the IBC, and of course they didn't touch Chapter 13. So I'm talking to the building inspector. I'm like, oh, so you're enforcing the 2015 energy code for commercial? And he, oh no, we're on the 2000. I was like, yeah, but the more restrictive applies. And because you didn't amend out Chapter 13 of the IBC, what you've done in effect is adopted two conflicting codes, the 2015 IECC commercial and the 2000 IECC commercial. When you have two conflicting codes, what applies? The more restrictive. And he obviously didn't change his way of doing business and just kind of grumbled at me and went on. But just keep in mind, and I'm going to show a code book here in a little bit and talk a little bit more about some other things to keep in mind when you're thinking about the code book. And last but certainly not least, we want to avoid some liability and legal issues. I think at some point, this will be a big driver. Actually, we've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. So now we're to the resources part. So I'm going to show you the websites I mentioned, and then we'll finish. Oh, I just closed that one. That was just a copy of state law. Again, this one's just showing House Bill 1736, where the 2015 Energy Code is required. And also, it requires that code certified inspectors enforce it. This is a handy, those of you that don't know about Legiscan, this is pretty handy. This is on one of the hyperlinks in the presentation. You can search by code text or bill number. It's super helpful to search. But this one here is about the HB 2858, which September 1st of 2019, that 2018 Pool and Spa Safety Code is going to be effective. This one, Senate Bill 1410, this is the one that goes and says, hey, after you can't enact by ordinance requiring the installation of fire sprinkler for 1 or 2 family dwellings, so you don't want to be conflict there. House Bill 852. So if you're adopting new codes and you're using that value-based building permitted inspection fees, you probably want to go ahead and get off that and get in line with state law. Me personally, I think square footage is a real easy way to do it. I was real friendly for solar permits. I made them real cheap, but there's a bunch of things to consider when you're thinking about that, as far as your admin costs, your plan review costs, permit, inspection charges, square footage. I mean, it's not like you can't get more money by doing it a different way. So this is kind of weird that they chose to do this to me, but it is what it is. So keep in mind, on the building codes, and a real good reason to adopt them every 3 years is because there's solid vertical lines in the margins within the body of the code that show you what's been changed. So if you go from the 2015 to the 2018, you can see by these different asterisks, double asterisks, arrows, or for where entire sections have been deleted. Basically, it gives you clues of what's changed from one code to the other. I know when I was building official in Granbury, we went from the 97 UBC to the 2012 IBC. There are no margins, no marks in any margin to help you as a code official with that headache. Again, the coordination between the building and fire codes is crucial. That's a really important part of it. I do want to show one more thing on the building code side real quick. There is sample legislation for the adoption of the building code as an ordinance right there in the preface of the building code. It's written really clearly. I think it's kind of funny that ICC wants you to buy 3 copies of all the codes. To me, 1 copy would be more than sufficient. And then now also ICC offers free copies of the codes online. That wasn't that way 3 years ago. I can't tell you how many times in section 101, jurisdictions don't ever amend that. Let me show you what that's supposed to be. So 101, so when you adopt this code under the scope administration, you're supposed to amend 101.1 with the name of your jurisdiction. Here's an example of that line that I talked about. So this part right here was changed from the 2018. It's amazing how much is in here in the building code. Another really interesting thing on the building code, you see the italicized words. that tells you that that word is in the definitions chapter. So you might find repair somewhere else in the code. If it's not italicized, it means that the definition in the definitions chapter doesn't apply. So that's just something pretty handy to know about the codes that a lot of folks don't quite get into the weeds about. This was that letter from the TML's attorney that has that nice history of what Senate bills and House bills created the adoption of state codes. I'll show you another good website for that. And then on SPEER's website, I apologize, we are in a retune of our website to make it a little more visually appealing, so it doesn't, the hyperlinks in the PowerPoint will be to the old style website, but I just wanted you to know that if you hopped on here, it's going to look a little different than this was the old version here, but this links to the state laws. This has got various code adoption tools, ICC, link to BPI, a link to our events calendar. I mean, a ton of links on that page. On this page, we've got a sample city ordinance for you, but there's also one in the building code. There's also sample handouts, compliance verification forms. If you have any questions, click on this button right here. I'll get an email directly. We've got some code amendment suggestions. And certainly, if you are adopting new codes, you know, get it written up and send it over to me. I'd be happy to recommend some amendments for you that can help make your life a little easier. The link to ICC will come to this page right here, and it'll show you're looking at the 2021 codes, free views, or you can go to any year you want and look at free views of the codes. This wasn't in existence 5 years ago. It's fantastic, great resource. Another good resource, other cities. Look at other cities. How did they word it? You know, look, this is the city of Irving. Lawrence Crowe runs a tight ship. He knows what he's doing there. Well, hey, how did they word it? What are some of their amendments? Other cities is a fantastic resource. And then I think that's about it. We have just enough time. And again, all of those links are here in the webinar. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to questions. And Carolyn, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jason. So we do have time for a few questions. If anybody has some questions to put in the chat box for either Jason or myself.
And then certainly if you think of something later, you see our email addresses here. And again, those will be in the PDF of the presentation. So don't hesitate afterwards.
And as a reminder, both the COG and the SPEER presentations will be posted on websites.
Must have been really thorough, Carolyn. Oh my gosh. I mean, we just knocked it out of the park. But I do want to just reiterate and especially, oh, hey, we did have one come in. Before I read that, for some of you smaller building departments, if you're just now getting a building department established and you're just now hiring an inspector and you want somebody to come in and kind of consult and help you adopt the new codes and kind of set up some forms, and that's right in my wheelhouse. Now granted, traveling and being around people is a little sketchy right now, but I can help all over the place through online, and please don't hesitate to ask. And then as far as on the ICC CEUs, if you will, Carolyn, if you will send out a course evaluation, ICC likes a course evaluation for CEUs. I can send you a copy of a course evaluation. When you send out the PDF, when Carolyn sends out the PDF, if you'll just fill out the course evaluation, and then we can get you your ICC CEUs. And then hey, good comments. Oh, we had one more question come in. How do I check if my jurisdiction is a member of the RCCC so I can encourage them if not?
Okay, that's a COG question. I would recommend you just send me a quick email. I can check. Well, there's two ways to be a member of the RCCC. You can be an elected member, or you can be an interested active community member, or be on an advisory board. Shoot me an email. My email address is there, chorner@nctcog.org. and I will look you up, and I can also respond back with some information about the RCCC if you are not an active member.
Okay, and then one more came in on the chat, and Aaron, your guess is as good as mine on this one. And you would think that, you know, being with SPEER, and I would be really in tune to, and, you know, the recently retired director of CECO, Dub Taylor, is my barbecue eating buddy. And so you would think I had some sort of inroad to what the state's going to do about the 2021. For those of you that don't know, House Bill 1736, to get the builders agreement on it, they said, okay, that's fine. We'll sign off on the 2015 Energy Code, but they're like me. I'd love it if ICC would go every 6 years instead of every 3. But the builders were tired of this every 3-year changes, and so they said no, nothing until the 2021. Well, by state law, CECO has to look at the 2021. ESL will analyze it for stringency. It's going to be significantly more stringent. For example, in the NCTCOG area, you're looking at R49 instead of R38 for ceiling insulation. You're looking at slab insulation. Builders are going to lose their mind over slab insulation. Now, that's prescriptive. You can trade it off, but that's a hard trade-off because the energy modeling gives, in my opinion, way more bang for the buck than is in reality for slab insulation. So that's a long, convoluted story to make a short answer of there is no telling. And I have a sneaky feeling that's going to be back at the legislature with people griping. I don't anticipate, because of the significant bump in efficiency, that I don't anticipate CECO making a move on the 2021. I just really don't, but we'll see. And yes, you're true. And with the new map, most of NCTCOG is going to be in climate zone 2 with a new climate zone map. But that's energy code weeds that, thank you for dragging me into, Aaron, because that is where I truly like to live, is in the energy code. But I'm happy to help y'all with all of your codes, so don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm done, Carolyn. I'll give the parting words to you, and then we'll call it a day.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. A quick reminder, the presentations with links will be posted on both the Regional Building Codes website, and a recording will also be posted on the Tools and Resources website for COG, and also on SPEER's website. We will have follow-up evaluations going out, and since I don't see any additional questions, this webinar is concluded. Have a happy 4th of July.